Was it really common for you growing up for people to ask you what you wanted to be when you grow up?
What are you going to end up preparing for that will pay you sufficiently to have a family and support them?
And that's what they're really looking for. And that's really leads to the freedom of choice. Why would I go to something where I can't pay off anything and now you're stuck?
We're saddling children with a ton of problems to solve that we had a lot to do with.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is September 9th, 2024. You are watching the Daily AI Show live, and today we are talking about a really cool idea about how jobs are changing and how we want to talk with our children, not only our children, but people who are moving into maybe the job world, coming out of maybe schooling, also people who are changing careers, and just having a different conversation about what does it mean, definitely in the age of AI, to talk about if you were to tell a child, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that's really where this starts from. We're going to get into all of it. Before we do that, let me tell you who we have here, because this is going to be a fun conversation. We have Jyunmi, Beth, Karl, Andy, and I'm Brian. And I actually think here, I want to kind of jump to Karl. And here's the reason why, Karl, not to put you on the spot, but actually, when I was looking at places around the world that not necessarily about job, but like quality of life versus necessarily it being about the job. I knew a couple of places in Germany because I know people who live there, but Canada, as well as like Calgary, Ottawa, came up on lists for me over and over again. So I kind of want to maybe start with you because you're on this particular stage, you're the lone non-American. Everybody else here lives in the U.S., but you don't. So I'm just curious to get your outside perspective from a Canadian perspective. Do you see a difference from, like, what the U.S. culture is? We do identify a lot with what our job is, and that plays a large role in society. Do you also see that in Canada, or is there a difference?
I think, I was working out a couple of days ago with a friend of mine, and we were talking about, and it's not even country by country, it's by region. I think, because I live in the West, in the East, because my friend came from the East, the thinking was, hey, you need to, or how he grew up was, you need to work as hard as you can, make as much as you can, so then you can retire early and then go and have some fun. I feel there's not everybody, but a sentiment in the West, because I think maybe it's weather, just we have mountains, we have things to do. It's like, well, why don't we work hard, but we also play hard too? We love going outside. Why not take advantage of the mountains, the weather, and so on, right? In the East, like, let's say you have a cottage, but you only have the cottage and there's only so many places you can go, versus the West. It's like, it's regional too. So what really got me thinking about this ties back to, I saw something from Simon Sinek, and it really resonated with me, because he was mentioning how, and for those who don't know Simon Sinek, he had this one video, it's Your Why, and then kind of blew up, and he has another thing called Leaders Eat Last, and so on. But he mentioned how over time, and maybe this doesn't necessarily have to do with AI, but AI is going to be playing a huge part of this, is where he was mentioning in the 50s, you had a job, but your job was just a job. You had your church, your bowling league, and your friends, and they were all separate. So you go to your bowling league, twice a week, you go to church, and you have your friends, and you have your each of those was a community. And then you have your work, you go to work and you come home. I think over time, those individual pieces have melded together. So your community is your work. Your community, your church is your work. Where who you hang out with becomes people at work, and your friends are people at work. So, because think about how much time we spend at work versus how much time we spend at home. So that has melded together, which has led to who you are, who you identify as is your work. But I think there's a lot of counter thinking right now. It's like, remember, I love this person I follow on TikTok, the lazy investor, and he's always railing against corporate and how corporate doesn't care for you at all. But I think we're forgetting that what you do is not who you are. And I think that resonated with Sinéad's article, really resonated because it's like, or her video is, you aren't Brian, the sales, AI salesperson. You aren't Beth, the social Salesforce person. You aren't Andy, the CTO or CEO of this company. You're not. You're Andy Halliday, who is this person who has so many different interests. And so I think tying it back to AI, if what the expectation is from agents to redefining the workforce itself, maybe it's an opportunity for us to not tie people to what do you want to grow? What do you want to be when you grow up? Well, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a YouTuber, right? But you're not. Mr. Beast, yes, he's a YouTuber, but I bet you he's not. There's layers to that individual. Everybody else has layers to who they are. I just think now we need to, because remember, in every single conversation, usually the conversation starter is, hey, what do you do? Which then ties to, oh, I am this. But you're not. You're not that. You're your own person who just happens, I think, to do this. And maybe you love it or maybe you hate it, but there's more to an individual than that.
Quick follow-up question before we show Sinéad's video, because that was the inspiration for today's show, and I have it queued up here in a second. But I'm just curious, Karl, as you were growing up as a child, was it as common for you, let's say in your, just as a preteen, teen era, before you were starting to think seriously maybe about post-high school or that variation, but was it really common for you growing up for people to ask you what you wanted to be when you grow up? Did you have aunts and uncles? Did you have friends of parents always asking you that? Did your parents do that?
All the time, right? And then, the joke is the Asian parents who are like, you need to become a lawyer, a doctor, engineer if you really have to, but right, like there's a level of it.
If you really have to.
If you really have to. But that's the level. But I also think too, though, when you say I want to become a firefighter, cool, or I want to become a YouTuber, that's cool. But I'm like, I think we all tie ourselves to that person is only a YouTuber or whoever they are personally. When we watch them, we see them. Oh, that defines them, right? They are always a firefighter from the morning they wake up to the morning from the time they go to bed. But they're not. There's a layer to it. And I think, okay, so Brian, from a sports perspective, I think people get in trouble of this a lot. Whoever you like, whoever your player, and I like to pull out Odell Beckham Jr. He's actually quite active on LinkedIn. When he, football player, all these different teams he's played for, but it's kind of neat following him outside and seeing a little bit, maybe not all, but the different layers that person has. So he's not OBJ, with the catch and that's all he's known for. Is like, well, there's a lot of different layers to that person, but most people, the only thing they see is that or a celebrity. And I think it's dangerous to tie the celebrity to the actual person. And that's why I love the saying, never meet your heroes because you'll always be disappointed. And you're like, yeah, they're human like everybody else with flaws, but we tie that to a dead identity that they are, but they're not. So it's fascinating how that kind of works.
Let me pull this real quick, and then let's get everybody in for their comments and thoughts on this whole idea. But this video really quick is where like I said, the idea for this show came up, and we have shared stuff from, and I'm going to ask you guys really quick because I'm always bad about names and pronunciation. Sinéad, who wants to give it to does anybody know exactly how to pronounce her first name? What would you guess, Sinéad?
Sinead, because it's Sinead O'Connor, right? That's the first thing that connects it together.
Is that what everybody else says too, Sinead, do you think? Okay. All right. We're going to go with that. But I always like to try to get people's names right. And I kind of mess it up. So I always like to ask. Okay.
about how we need to stop asking kids what they want to be when they grow up. What did you mean by that?
And I know that question is usually asked with the best intention. But the reality is most of the jobs that a child would see today or answer that question with probably won't exist by the time they are in a working age, or they'll be radically transformed. So instead of kind of setting people up, and it's not for failure, but for the idea that your identity is attached to the job that you do, when we know the future of work is going to be very different, we should be encouraging kids to think more broadly about the problems that they want to solve, because those are more likely to exist than a specific occupation. And especially as technology continues to more rapidly disrupt the workforce, we have to move away from this idea that you are your job, because that's going to change. So if we can start with kids and encouraging them, what are the skills that you want to learn and the problems that you want to solve? And one of the most important skills for the future being critical thinking and imagination. That's something that children are already naturally endowed with. Lean into that.
Curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
When you said that.
Okay, we'll pause it there. She just talks a little bit more about the jobs, some of the other stuff we want to talk about, as far as some of the jobs that have disappeared and jobs that are appearing, which I found really fascinating as I started to dig in and say, and I want to hear from you guys in this, but where my brain on this was like, hey, what jobs aren't here or are here from the time that I was a kid? And then I was like, well, never mind a kid. I was a kid and I was my daughter's age in 1991. Okay, that's pre-internet, or that was bulletin board system-ing at that time, right? It was sort of pre-internet. Never mind that. That's 30 plus years ago, whatever. What jobs weren't here in 2010? And oh boy, does that start to open up a whole bunch of things. Apparently, I cannot be a Blockbuster video, owner. And who knew? Who knew that I couldn't sell CDs and VHS anymore? That wasn't a job that I could aspire to be. Okay, let me open it up to the crew here because nobody else has had a chance to talk. Who wants to jump in here? Where does your sort of brain go? Obviously, these are really compelling thoughts, and it really is more about, this is happening anyway. It's not just AI, by the way. This is happening. This has been happening for decades upon decades. Jobs disappear, jobs reappear. So do we have to have a shift in how we are thinking about jobs and how it applies to our social status and things like that? Who wants to pick it up from there?
I kind of resonated with what she was saying about not asking kids what do they want to be when they grow up, but what problems do they want to solve or what skills they want to have and things like that. I think that kind of, for me, that goes to the larger question is we should just be asking kids, what kind of person do they want to be when they grow up? Or even just tweaking the question is like, what do you want to do in the future? It doesn't have to be about what job or, creating that identity of work and things like that. Because one of the, utopian ideals that hopefully AI will be able to bring us, but is the concept that people can start doing the things that they most resonate with, the things that they have the most motivation for. And of course, for me, that's, I can see a lot more in the creative space, and we can expand upon those creative arts and things like that. But this also includes people who are really into the scientific side. I love the AI and science stories. I want people to be inspired to have that motivation to work in the fields of that appeal to them, right? If you are scientifically minded, work in that field, as opposed to the situation they may be in, whatever systemic situation that they are in, right? If they don't, it's about opportunities and things like that. But if you have if the infrastructure as a whole has been changed, then you have that opportunity to really go after the things that you have a passion for, and having the time to try everything else out and find what your passion is for. And that might change over time as well. So if you have the tech, if you have AI, you have the infrastructure and the new systems that provide that, I think you'll get far more progress over over all of humanity than, and the individual. I know this sounds kind of philosophical and out there and whatnot, but we really do have an opportunity, because this is, lack of a better term, paradigm shift
because of this emerging technology. And it's going so quickly, we do have to adapt faster than we have to previous technologies.
I would agree. I, for a fairly long time, have been multiple things, right? So, and I kind of track the reaction that I get when people ask me. First of all, I live outside Washington, D.C. People ask what you do before they ask your name. Like, it's bad here. It's really bad here. And I often get the question, oh, do you make money at that? Can that be a living? Right? What do you do? I teach improv. Is that can you make a living at that? And I'm like, my God, if I said I'm an accountant, does someone say how much money do you make as an accountant? I mean, it's just like that kind of thing. So I think that's another part of this. And as we move away from identifying with the career, we're also going to move away from the position title. We're also going to move away from the assumption that if I know your title is an accountant, I'm pretty sure you're making enough money, but I don't know if you're an improv teacher. But also, it's not your business, right?
Well, I wonder, Beth, though. I mean, I get that you're right. That's crazy. But like, I get it to a certain point, because I almost wonder if people are asking because in their mind, they're thinking, oh, I didn't know that was a possibility. And I've heard people talk about this. I'm a big fan of Conan O'Brien. I grew up through his heyday, right? And I still love his podcast and stuff. And he's getting his rewards now. He has tons of people who come on his podcast who I remember sort of like with David Letterman, where people go, dude, you're the reason I got into this at all. They would tell David Letterman that all the time on the show. Now people are saying that, Conan O'Brien's like 60, somewhere in there. So he has people who quite literally grew up, decided to get into comedy or some sort of entertainment because they saw Conan O'Brien on TV, quite literally being a professional idiot. Yeah, he would call himself that, not just me, in the best way. And people said, I didn't know you could do that and make money. Like, I didn't even know that was an option for me. I thought I had to be the lawyer that, like Karl was talking about or whatever. So I wonder, Beth, if people sort of, vomit that out of their mouth, but really what they're saying is, it's not, I don't care how much you make, Beth. What I care about is that something I could do? Is that an option for me? Because maybe I really hate what I'm doing right now. So I wonder if it's more of a curiosity. People don't know. And I think this goes along with kids too, not just adults. If you ask my daughter, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? She has about this many jobs that she knows the title of. And she half knows what those jobs do. For instance, she wants to be like an interior designer. Ask her really what an interior designer does, and it starts to flake out really quickly. I'm not beating on my daughter for that. Like, that's just, come on, she's a kid. How much is she going to know? And then there's all these other jobs and opportunities and possibilities that she's just not aware that exist at all. And we see this with adults too. They've gone into whatever profession. They've been there 15, 20 years. They've had sort of look down at their desk. They're chugging along, making a good career. And they haven't really looked up in the last decade to see what else is out there. What else could possibly be going on? Okay, I haven't heard from Andy yet, so I want to throw it over to you.
Okay, indulge me. I have a kind of a cynical point of view about this. I don't think that the next generations are going to focus on their passion or be given the opportunity to focus on their passion unless there's a major change to the capitalist system. They will be drawn inexorably into those jobs that currently pay in their local vicinity. And they'll end up having to do that. It's a settling kind of thing. But the problem is that currently those jobs that pay are in decline in the face of these technological advancements. So indulge me for some historical context. When I was growing up, there were all these buildings with names on them like Smith and Sons. And why? Because local businesses were family legacies. And the offspring of the family got slotted into the work that the family was doing historically. So now rewind all the way back to the beginnings of civilization. And in the transition from hunter-gatherer societies to agrarian economies, The nomadic hunter-gatherers broke their bands into those that stayed with the crops while the hunters ranged for prey, and communities grew around that, and then there became barter. So some skill that you had, like, hey, I can really grow great corn, became something that I could now bring you a basket of corn in exchange for your meat. And that was the formal method in those communities for sharing collaborative fruits of labor. Okay, then technology comes along, like ironwork. Okay, specialization around tools and skills created specific jobs like blacksmiths, hence Smith and Sons, which many decades later, centuries later, is really where that came from. If your last name was Smith, it was because somewhere in your long past, your legacy was in blacksmithing. Though the kiln and anvil process served, at most a region measuring a few miles from the town center. Then you get to the Industrial Revolution that created factories from manufactory, right? And the manufacturing process and the option of working on an assembly line process on a larger scale created cities. So people ended up being concentrated in a place that was so dense that they couldn't have this community barter system anymore, right? They had to be, in some respects, enslaved to the jobs that were in the manufacturing process. But there emerged from that a supporting service economy. So then you have butcher, baker, candlestick maker, right? So you have all these other people who are supporting the city manufacturing processes. But what we really all can resonate with is this variety of local tradespeople or small business owners within a smaller community. So we want to believe that we can choose to follow our passion and figure out some artisanal occupation that was common in earlier times with local economies, and relied on specialized skills. But the reality today is, even back then, you didn't so much pick a trade as you were born into it or you were nominated for an apprenticeship. And now that's gone. There's no apprenticeships available in my community that I know of. And now youth are clawing at the idea of, I want to be a social media influencer and trade on their personality and creativity. And I think that's a long shot. So I think the next generations are really not going to be allowed to focus on their passion unless they can be freed of the obligation to work at the jobs that pay currently in their nearby environs. That's my point of view about it.
I agree with you, Andy. And my ideal can only happen if things change from what you've talked about. So we have this opportunity. Let's do it. And Ryan, I wanted to point out, based on what like you and Beth were talking about, was that when people ask like how much you're making, right, or you can make money at that, they're not really I don't think they're really asking that about the money. They're asking about living, sustaining themselves, right, or even living comfortably. And that's what they're really looking for. And that's really leads to the freedom of choice and freedom in their life and the freedom of those choices, right? And you can only really have that if, the things are, we're coming to recognize that the current systems are not working. So we need to modify those and make changes. I will be the first to admit, I do not have the answers for this. But what I'm seeing here is the opportunity, because of AI and because of this, these technological changes, that we could take advantage of that. We could take advantage of this progression and make those changes. But I will stop soapboxing there.
Well, I want to push back a little bit on Andy, I guess, and by virtue proxy you. But I also want to I need my virtual stump to get on here, because you guys know I've certainly talked in this show many times about how I feel about the education system, and I will give you a perfect example of this, of where this is still going wrong and where it needs to change, Jyunmi. I think my daughter, well, we had other people in neighbors and such, but my daughter next year would go into high school. She wants to do things a little bit differently, but other neighbors and so on went and visited a different school. Beautiful school, private school. It was on, whatever it was, 100 acres or whatever. It was beautiful, right? I won't get into the school or the specifics. I don't want to get into that, but it was private, and the cost was the cost of whatever, and not really something we were necessarily looking to do. But even if I could, even if it was a financial thing that was not an issue for us, I still would prefer not to send my daughter there. And here's one of my main reasons, among many others. But one of the reasons, their website was 100% geared towards, we will get your child into this career path to get them accepted at a college. And I'm like, you're just a funnel, man. You're just part of the machine. And that bothers me. It bothers me as a human being, not just a parent. Yes, I have a 13-year-old, but it bothers me as a human being that this is still the path that we're doing. And again, I'll say this over and over again. Yes, college is right for many people. Yes, you probably still need a college degree to be, to have good success in certain areas and industries. Not all, but certain of them. And yes, there's a lot that comes out of the college experience if you were to go on site and live there for 4 years. All the things you're going to learn about life and things that you need to grow as a human. Yes. But to take a kid that's in high school and say, back to your point, Andy, never mind, we will show you the potential of what's out there. We're gonna corral you into these same lanes and these same things so that a college loves you and you can pay them $40K a year or more for them to love you and for you to get this degree. So now you feel stuck and you've got this huge weight on you with student debt because you needed it to get this degree. And now you're stuck. Now you're a 21-year-old or a 22-year-old and you're, stuck because you've got this degree that qualifies you for this type of job. And now you have to pay off these loans. And where are you going to stay? Well, hey, I'm only making $40K because, by the way, that's the average coming out of college, $40K in the US, right? So not some high standard of living with a 4-year degree, $42, $45K, depending on where you're going to live around the country. Now I have to stay here because in 2 to 3 years, I might be able to get that up to 60 with good behavior. And I can maybe pay off my loans in 15, 20 years. I'm stuck, right? So where do we need to fix this? Going back to what you're saying, Andy, and this is my opinion, before college, into high school, middle school, we need to be showing these children more opportunities for things that they can do and ways they can help and fix and do in the world. And I do think, Andy, that comes back to apprenticeships, even if that's not like old school apprenticeships where you're going to spend 6-8 months and seriously learn a trade. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. That's a fantastic way if you know what you want to do. But how about just opening up the realm of possibility for children? They simply can't know what they don't know. They have ignorance. It's not their fault. They need to be taught. Whose job is that? Us. It's our job to make sure that children and adults know what the opportunities are. And frankly, I think we need to do the same thing for adults because a lot of adults don't know. And what we're going to see, as we know, we lived through the dot-com boom. Dot-com boom, by the way, was my entire college, 96 to 2000. I went to college in the dot-com boom, which is kind of crazy, right? But that just happens to be the case. And we saw it happen then. We saw this change in industry, and we're going to see something orders of magnitude higher than that with AI.
So I just want to pop in here.
I'll get off my stuff.
Karl,
Okay.
sorry, I will let you talk in just a second. I just want to pop in here because I do live in Washington, D.C., so I am aware that that the U.S. government has an initiative toward apprenticeship. And right now, I think it's mostly toward the public sector. But there's a whole thing like, do you want to start an apprenticeship? Do you have a thing that you want to teach through an apprenticeship? I'm popping the link in the chat, but it's basically apprenticeships.gov because .gov just means us. Sorry to the rest of the world, but you could, in fact, find an apprenticeship in that context. The other thing that I want to point out is that my first certification was in Salesforce. My first Salesforce certification was as a Salesforce admin. That was free to learn and do, and $200 to take the test. And there was a huge push for the last series of years to say, hey, before you go to college or maybe during your senior or junior year, like, go ahead, study the thing, build some orgs, like, get this skill. And there were all these stories about people who still chose to go to college, but they were paying for their college by being a Salesforce admin part-time, and therefore getting experience as a longer Salesforce admin. Like, now they're coming into the job force if they want to continue to do that, but they're also coming out of college with zero debt because they had a skill that was worth the equivalent amount of money to survive going to college for 4 years. So those are my things. Karl, I cut you off.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to. So Brian, you resonated with me because I went to school during the great, I don't even call it the 2008 recession, right? Where you saw that. What's funny is a lot of Gen Z that are, making their videos and so on, they're recognizing, wait a minute, we've been fed something that is not, I think a lot of more people are open to ideas like, why would I go to something where I can't pay off anything and now you're stuck. Why did I go to that path? Why did I do this? And the whole point of this is coming from someone who did an undergrad, who did an MBA. This is coming from that. And then I look back, it's like, well, I was fed the same thing, that I needed to do this. And hey, why not get this to get more money? But I'm like, do you really, you can't take that same path now because everyone is taking that path. And you are going to be in debt. You're not going to, I guess if you take all the stats, your average salary could be higher. But that's why I love what AI is, the homework apocalypse that Ethan Mollick was saying. It's I love it because like it or not, it's turning everything upside down and it's causing chaos, right? 57, 61% of students are using it. It's you can't teach the same things anymore. You can't make people write papers and do these things because an AI could do it for you. And I don't care. It's well, it's not that good. It's yeah, give it a year. It's going to be better and better and better and better and better and better. So you can't tell, right? So I think we're missing the point now. I think you can't feed the same path to students. They have to change. They have to start thinking about it. I think we as our generation or generations have to now feed back and say, hey, there's a heavy more emphasis on critical thinking because of deepfakes and so on. But also, going back to tying it to your identity, it's well, you can, if you are $50,000 in debt, guess what? You're going to have to take a corporate job. And sure, you may want to rise in the corporate ranks, but you didn't have a choice because $50,000, $100,000, you have no choice. You have to go down that to pay something off. But I'm but what if you never had to do that? What if you did this path? And it's you went into trades, you became a plumber, you made whatever thousands. I don't have any debt. But now you have an opportunity. Hey, with AI, I can maybe pivot a little bit and try this. And maybe I'll be in debt. Maybe only $20,000 in debt, not $100,000 debt, which allows me more flexibility. I think we have to just ensure that our children have that opportunity, that thinking of, hey, with these all these tools, and whether you want to become a social media influencer or not, you have opportunities that the university path or the college path isn't the only one, and isn't the only one to get you higher pay or whatnot. There are a lot more opportunities. I've seen a lot more people make this much. My business partner never finished, never went to college, university, has multiple businesses. So it's that person was successful without having to go. And he, to this day, he's yeah, if I went to school, I would have had to just stick to a path because I wouldn't have seen the opportunities that I could have done. And in your 20s, man, you have time. So you should try all these different paths because you have if you really need to, you can always go back to university and take that one path.
And that comes back to exposure. There has to be exposure. I'm not picking on kids. Look, if kids are on devices, or we say, oh, boo-hoo, kids spend too much time, guess whose fault that is? The adults. It's not the kids' fault. Like, it's not. Come on. And we would have done the exact same thing. I had Nintendo. I played Nintendo when I was in the 90s or whatever, and that's what we chose to do in our time. So to be 40 in my 40s and be like, hey, kids, you're on TikTok too long. Like, yeah, I was on Nintendo too long, unless my mom told me there was a time limit for how long I'd be on Nintendo. But as a teenager or preteen or whatever, I would have chosen to stay on Nintendo for many, many more hours because that's what was fun with my friends. I like going outside and all that. So I think it's the responsibility of this generation. And I 1,000% agree with you, Karl. I grew up in the same way, maybe not with my parents saying you have to do this or that, but because it was so necessary to climb the corporate ladder and do the things for my parents to have a college degree. My mom didn't. My dad got his college degree 2 years before I graduated college. He was well into his aviation career, and he needed it because it was going to be a ceiling for him. And so he got it from Embry-Riddle, and he rose and eventually was a VP and so on and so forth. So from my parents' standpoint, of course, go to college. That's the path to success. But college also costs like 140% less comparatively. So getting back to this show's topic, and I want to make sure we're staying on it, is when you talk to children, you say, what problems do you want to solve? Not what do you want to do? What problems do you solve? I resonate 1,000% with Sinéad's video because yes, absolutely. And then the next step after that is not, hey, child, what problems do you want to solve? It's let me or get other people around us from this community to show you ways that you can solve these problems. For me, I became a firefighter because I wanted to help people. I knew selfishly that nothing felt better than helping people. It's not like, oh my God, thank you, you're here, Brian. I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this for me. And I'm glad that it helps you too, but this is for me and all my Catholic guilt that I had to be brought up with, right? Like, this is for me because I know how good nothing in this world feels as good as helping somebody else, bar none. Do it for free. It's the best, right? And firefighting was a path towards that. So I chose firefighting because I wanted to help people as a profession, not because I wanted to put fires out. That was a great side to it, but that's not why I chose it. And guess when I came up with that idea? 2 years after college. The only thing that saved my butt was that my parents were doing well at that point, and I had zero college debt when I walked out of college. Zero. So guess who could pivot? Me. Guess who most kids can't pivot these days? And they have 16 times more debt to deal with than I would have ever had. Yeah, I get hot about this, obviously, but it's such a big deal. Go ahead, Beth.
So I think one of the things, like, I would want to encourage us to tweak the question a little bit because we're saddling children with a ton of problems to solve that we had a lot to do with why they're here. So like, hey, look, I did this mess. Which part will you start cleaning up after me? But I do think that it is important to open a conversation. And I have a friend named Liz Lerman, who's an author and choreographer and MacArthur Genius Grant honoree. And she tells of her father driving her around and like just car trips with her dad, right? And having conversations about, hey, what do you think about that? Right? That looks like a problem somewhere over there. What do you think you could do to fix that? Right? Like, let's have the conversation. Maybe they'd like fix that when you grow up, kind of stuff. But that kind of thing. So it isn't just, so it's not like we're abandoning the kids. I guess what I hear, like, hey, what problem do you want to solve, feels a little like abandonment. But maybe you're continuing the conversation. Maybe I am projecting conversations that I maybe had with my parents.
I get your point. I get what you're saying. Like, I get what you're saying, Beth, that it's like, it's not what problems that I created, my generation created, would you like to solve for us? I get your point. I don't take it that way, but I get your point that could be, it could be perceived that way for sure. Go ahead, Andy.
As a parent, I think that the question that Sinéad reframes so nicely to like what contribution do you want to make to society in the future? And what are you going to be when you grow up? Underlying all that is, what are you going to end up preparing for that will pay you sufficiently to have a family and support them, right? And that's the rub. It's tricky. Whether you have it as wide open a range of possibilities as, hey, be creative, be an entrepreneur, be something that you have some passion about, or, which doctor or lawyer kind of specialization do you want to pursue? For me anyway, at this late stage of my life, they're both the same question. And that's the struggle. It's the economic question of, what do people do? What do the many billions of people on the planet do when the sort of capital elite are building frameworks that are going to obviate the need for humans in that loop? That's a real trick.
Don't you think, though, Andy, this is my pushback on that. Don't you think, though, if a child or a young adult says, this is what I want to do in my life, and I've accepted that this is not going to pay a lot, but I was brought up and I had good people around me and they said, pursue happiness, right? The pursuit of happiness. And I know that if I live at this standard, the tiny house, the whatever, right? Or whatever the case is, or maybe perhaps you have to move out of the United States for those that live in the United States. Perhaps that's the better move, right? For lower cost of living in other areas that we know because of the remote economy. That's now something that's possible that wasn't possible in my early childhood at all. But if we have those discussions and we say, but if that's what you want to do, if that's what lights you up, if that's what makes you happy, child, then these are some of the concessions you're going to have to make, because as of right now, it doesn't mean you can't be the 1%, but as of right now, this is sort of the ceiling of what somebody in that area makes. By the way, it's very easy now in the gig economy to have 2, 3, or 4 different passions and pursue those independently, and maybe collectively, they all add up to a salary that, that's me, that's Beth, that's a lot of us, right? That we do several different things. But don't you think if that's where we're pushing kids and we say, hey, by the way, that house on the hill, let's go talk to them. I bet you they're no happier than you. That person over there with the 4 cars, let's go talk to them. I bet you if you get them to say their truth, they're no happier than you. We know the money doesn't make people happy. I've talked to enough millionaires. I know that's the case. I know that's the case.
I get your point. I'm not trying to advocate that the real objective is to gain excessive wealth. That's not it. I just hope that they have sufficient to compete in the local economy so that they actually can live in a place that's safe and supportive. And there's a cliff there, right? There's a lot of people living in their cars now. Why? Because it's so hard for the average person out there to just get enough money to afford the rents that are being driven up by Airbnbs and the tourist economy from the people who actually have accumulated the wealth over their lifetimes in a different paradigm. So yes, paradigm shift is underway here. So sorry to be like the harbinger of doom here, and I don't want it to be that way. But by the way, I asked ChatGPT, what are some examples of modern societies where status and worth in community are not a function of career work product? And here are the ones. Indigenous societies in Latin America. Bhutan, widely recognized for its focus on gross national happiness, is a very tiny kingdom in the Himalayas. Pacific Islander societies, Jyunmi, there's a different model here, and they don't map over to where the human populations are now. It's the examples that ChatGPT can surface where that actually happens doesn't align with where the people are right now in the cities in the EU, in the United States, in Japan, in China. The people who have been migrated from their rural communities in China into the cities in order to populate the factories. Wow, how do you unwind that?
That's a good point. And I want to bring up Jen's, I know we're sort of on time here, but I want to bring up Jen's comment here just to make sure we're always getting all sides of it. Jen says, Brian, I want to push back to you. Pursuit of happiness is a heavily privileged, loaded concept. Not as easy if you don't come from money and research. 1,000%, Jen. I agree with that. And I definitely have blinders on I try to see around them the best I can, but 100%, right? I have things that I can't necessarily see because I'm white, I'm American, I'm male, I'm heterosexual, right? These are all things that work and have worked in my favor for many, many years that give me privilege in different areas. So I want to make sure I at least bring that up. And I agree with you, Jen. I think the only thing, it's not a pushback. The only thing I would say to that, Jen, is that what I would hope to do, and maybe this is just a call to action that I need to be more part of the solution, is I would love to be able to talk to children who don't come from privilege or money or whatever, and show them, as we've been saying with Karl and stuff like that, that perhaps there is a different path than going straight into college and assuming a lot of debt. Because then where do you go? Then the cycle just repeats itself. So if there are the internships like Beth shared, or there are other places in the community where people can put an arm around you, which we need more of, and say, come here, kid, let me show you how this works. LinkedIn is a good example of that, right? From the professional network. We don't necessarily have that for children. So maybe really the call to action, I am sure there's many, many lovely organizations and nonprofits that already do this. But that's where my not pushback, but my hope would be is that you're absolutely right, but let's not take kids that don't have money and tell them that college is the only solution so they can get in more debt than they can possibly pay off in their life. Because then there's just no pattern out of that. That's what scares me more than anything. So that would be the only thing I'd say.
Yeah, there's no reason why college shouldn't be free.
1,000%. Yeah. And by the way, it is in other countries.
And here, I mean, there are states where you can go to community college, basically tuition free. That doesn't mean it's inexpensive. You have to have a place to live. You have to eat. All of those things have to be supported while you get your education.
Yeah. I was going to say, my daughter, by the way, can get an associate's degree before she leaves high school on the state. There's no cost.
That's awesome.
She can do all 4 years of high school plus 2 years of an associate's degree on the path she's on with certain things. That's not because of privilege. That's the state. The state is offering that to her. So there are definitely paths because my daughter is on that path. So I can just say it from that perspective. Sorry, and Jimmy, what do you want to say? And then I would say let's.
Right. All I was going to say was college was it's one of the main reasons to go to college was so that you can learn, expand, and fail. Right. We learn the best by failing, learning from that, and adapting. What we don't have is a system to support people when they're failing forward, right? When they're failing, whether they're exploring a new passion or they're exploring a new field or anything like that. So so there's the stress of not being able to leave or change from whatever rut or system that you're stuck in because you can't allow yourself to fail. There is no support structure for that, no long-term thing. But we get our best innovations from when we try something, fail at it, reiterate, and build on top of it. So that might be one of the things that we need to look at is, hey, if you don't have to worry about failing, then you can continue to grow in whatever your passion is. And that will lead to innovation. And you can never see more motivation in a person to get the more productivity out of a person than when they love something. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I love it. This is a great place to end this. Okay, listen, the rest of this week, we have a ton of other great shows. The big Apple event is happening today. We don't really know what's going to be announced. I mean, there's been some leaks and stuff. Obviously, the show is more interested in the Apple Intelligence, the AI side of the announcement. We're going to have a show about that tomorrow. Right now, it might show that that's on Thursday, but we're switching that around. It was just like we were doing the scheduling on it. So that'll be tomorrow. Wednesday will be the news. Thursday, we'll be talking about inventing tomorrow's AI, talking about Google Labs. Really, really cool, fun, innovative stuff that's going on in Google Labs. And I want to just bring it to the surface to talk about all the fun little things that are in there. Because sometimes those little things, those little toys, those little like AI fun things rise to the surface and they become part of bigger productions and releases in AI. So you're getting a bit of a glimpse into the future when you look at Google Labs and what they're doing there. So we'll talk about that on Thursday and then Friday. Coding with Replit. Karl has been talking about Replit. We talked about Cursor last week. Replit came out with Replit Agent last week, and Beth and Karl have already sort of dug in there. I'm not sure who else did over the weekend, but we will be talking about that and doing Andy says too, We'll be talking about that on Friday and doing like sort of our honest review. We do that every other Friday. We dig into a tool and we'll let you know what we really love about it and everything else. So that's what's going on the rest of this week. Come back and hang out with us. And for now, we'll say goodbye. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for all the comments as always. This is a fun topic. It's obviously one I enjoy a lot myself, and I can't wait to keep coming back to it. And make sure you go follow Sinéad Bovell, because she's amazing, absolutely amazing. And I think you'll really enjoy a lot of the stuff that she is talking about as a futurist on LinkedIn and other places. All right. Have a great week or day, and we'll see you guys tomorrow on Tuesday. Bye.
Aloha.